My next guest is classically trained in opera and a musical theatre performer. They've previously performed in the National Boys Choir and with Opera Australia, now playing Zach in Theatrical's production of A Chorus Line. Welcome to Showtime, Julian Dods.
Thank you very much for having me, Andrew.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to have a chat, both in the rehearsal room and here like this too. So you started off in the National Boys Choir. How did that happen? How'd you get started?
Yeah, so my grandmother was Lee Wigglesworth, who was a massive contributor to choral music in Australia. She was a very high-ranking person in the Australian Boys Choir. And so when I turned, I think it was around 7 or 8, my mother pretty much said, cool, sweet, we're going to try music, see if it's something that you like. Put me in the boys choir, and I stayed there and pretty much excelled for the next 8 years, and just spent that growing my singing ability, growing my performing ability, and growing my professional repertoire as well, which was really, it was a really, really fortunate and good start to life that happened, because it's really given me the steadings that I have now for the future.
So was it passion and determination, or was it family expectation, do you think, that drove you?
It was always a little bit of both. I love performing. Performing gives me such joy, and it really makes me feel like I've made a difference to someone's life if I've put a good performance on and I've done a really good job. There's also the thing where my family is very academically, very good at academics. So my mother's got a PhD in engineering. My father runs his own IT business and is a computer magician. And my sister both of my sisters are currently going through university, studying very, very in-depth and complex degrees. So sort of it always felt like something that I was good at, that I could bring to the table, that I could sort of leave my mark on, which was important to have.
Yeah, of course. And you started off with the National Boys Choir and the family legacy that comes with that. But you've also been on stage with Opera Australia. That's huge. How did you get from Australian Boys Choir to Opera Australia?
Yeah, so the National Boys Choir were very well connected with different operas, and there's a lot of operas that require boy soprano parts. And things like that. So they would host auditions for that. And the choir sort of worked as an agency for that, where they would get approached by Opera Australia and Victorian Opera and companies like that. And they would send boys that they thought were really well adjusted for that sort of thing for auditions. You would audition, and then if you got the part, you would do the shows. And it was really wonderful to take part, and it really opened my eyes to the world of professional theatre and the sort of the time frames and the rehearsal schedules and the performance schedules that they go through was really eye-opening. You
say it so casually, but there's performing on stage, and then there's Opera Australia.
Yeah,
it's a big deal. Do you think as a young performer you processed how big a responsibility and how big an opportunity that was?
Absolutely not.
Which is probably a good thing.
Yeah, probably a good thing. Looking back at it now, I absolutely understand that I peaked really early. I got to the top, and I was very happy there, and I was like, yeah, this is great. But no, everyone in that industry was so lovely to us boy performers. It really didn't feel daunting. It didn't feel like there was a lot of pressure on us, when there absolutely was. And the people who were like rehearsing us and training us did such a wonderful job of treating us like performers, but with the acknowledgement that we essentially had no experience and were kids, which was really good.
And how did you get from that really classically trained, precise choir opera world to musical theatre?
Yeah, it was a bit of a jump. The first musical I ever did was the first school musical I ever did, which was Big the Musical. I played
the musical adaptation of the Tom Hanks movie.
That's correct, yeah. So I played the small version of Josh, And I have the recording of it, and I was watching it back a couple of years ago, and I was watching it, and it's very classically trained, like high notes, and I was like, yeah, I had it. I was doing a really good job, and I had no idea how to belt. Everything was head voice. There was no chest voice. Um, but doing that show really sort of opened my eyes into what performing could be for me. Opera is very, like, it's not stand and sing. There's a lot of acting and nuance that goes into it, but it can be very low energy compared to musical theatre. When musical theatre is high octane, everyone's hitting things. It definitely comes in waves, but I love as someone who liked to jump around and move around a lot as a kid, it was a wonderful outlet to just be able to express that emotion on stage in that way.
How do you think National Boys Choir helped you get to musical theatre?
They definitely gave me the vocal background that I have, the many years of vocal training and things like that. Also taught me, put me in really good stead to work with groups. So towards the end of my career with the choir, I was the choir captain. So gave me a sense of like leadership of a group of my peers, which was really, really valuable. So I don't think the choir so much prepared me for musical theatre so much as it prepared me for performing, which was really good.
And right now you're in rehearsals for A Chorus Line, which opens on the 7th of September at the National Theatre. It's a show that keeps on giving. It was on Broadway in 1975 before touring the United States and touring the world. It's won Tony Awards. It's won a whole heap of accolades. What do you think it is that people still love about Chorus Line?
Chorus Line is one of those shows that's so grounded in reality and is such a time capsule for the time period that it represents. It's like watching an old film that you loved as a child. It's going back and saying like, I felt this, I've been there, I've been that person, and really like finding, like, Chorus Line feels like one of those shows where almost everyone has a character that they're going to gravitate towards, that they're going to relate to. I feel like everyone I speak to has a different favorite character in this show. And that's because so many different stories are told throughout the show. And I think that's why audiences keep coming back to it. And I think that's why it is such a genuinely loved musical.
And it's using a Broadway audition room and process as a bit of a metaphor for life. But it's not just for musical theatre performers, is it? I mean, anyone that's ever gone through any sort of an interview or recruitment process, I think, can relate to the show. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely interesting to see Zach try and work down the guards of these people who have been intrinsically trained to go through auditions and be like, cool, we're in business mode is now. And then to sort of work through them and be like, no, like, why are you here? Like, what are you doing this for? Like, this is brilliant, but there's got to be a story to how you got here, which I just fell in love with the story when I watched the show. It's one of the first shows I remember seeing as a child. My parents took me.
Oh, wow. So it's a really special show for you. It's got that connection.
Yeah. I saw the professional production when it came to Melbourne, I think 13 years ago.
Yep.
And it's the first theatre show that I remember seeing, which, it was crazy.
And you're playing Zach. Who's Zach?
So Zach is a very big departure from who I am as a person personally. Zach is a director who is trying to cast the chorus line for his next big production, and I think he's really looking for a different way to do it. I think he's gotten stuck in the ways. I think he's getting very jaded with the industry, and I think he's trying to break the mold, do something that will make him stand out. And he really wants to get to know these people who are auditioning. And I think in the process of doing that, gains a deeper understanding of chorus auditionees and people who work in theatre in general. Because I think he's a little bit lost in that world. And especially with his ex-partner, Cassie, who arrives at the interview and sort of throws a spanner in the works. And he has to work through that with Cassie and sort of just find a whole new way of looking at the audition process. So I love Zach as a character. I love exploring him. I love finding all of his different nuances in place. And he does things that I would never consider doing. And it's really interesting to see a character that does that.
All these years later, I mean, it's been almost 50 years since the show originally opened on Broadway. Do you think it still has the same relevance in 2024?
I think that there are definitely a lot of things that have changed. I mean, now there's a lot of video auditions as first calls, and then mainly it's callbacks from then on. So there's not really the like heart pounding anxiety of just going to a cold call audition and trying out like that. But I absolutely think that this show still holds relevance in today's climate. I mean, there's a lot of work happening at the moment. There's a big push from the Victorian government for theatre to make a comeback after the torrid time that was 4 years ago, and just from people that I've spoken to and from my own personal experiences as well, it's absolutely still an example of what the audition process is.
And you're right, it's been a really, really tough time for theatre producers, theatre performers all over the country, and especially in Melbourne with all of the lockdowns that we had here. But going through St Kilda, going through the city, going to some of the small local suburban theatres, it seems that theatre's alive and well in Melbourne finally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm seeing auditions going up everywhere. I'm seeing cast lists being posted everywhere, and it's filling my heart back up because COVID, it didn't kill theatre for me, but it definitely, I took a massive hit during COVID where I stopped singing, I stopped performing, and it definitely felt like I lost a piece of my soul when that happened. I'm very glad that I'm getting back into performing now. I'm very, very glad. But yeah, I am really, really, really pleased that theatre is in the space that it's in and that it looks like it's only continuing to grow.
Julian, what do you want audiences to take away from A Chorus Line?
I mean, so Zach is in a very privileged position where he gets to sit and essentially watch the show every time. And I know when I've watched the runs that we've done, the just pure emotion and empathy that I feel for the characters. I really want audience members to form emotional connections with these characters and to go through their stories with them and to come away from the performance really feeling like they've met someone and they've seen someone and that they can resonate with that person.
It's such a beautiful show because it has all of those things that you described, but it's still got all the big show tunes and the big flashy lights and sounds. And it's something that you can absolutely kick back and just enjoy a piece of theatre, a piece of entertainment, or lean forward and sort of really think about it and connect with some of those incredible characters and their amazing stories.
Yeah, absolutely. There really is something for everyone in here, whether you just love theatre or if you're doing it for those emotional reasons. There's absolutely something for everyone here. The Chorus Line has some of the most iconic songs in theatre. Like you don't even need to know the show to have heard some of the songs. And everyone has heard What I Did for Love. That is just an absolute postcard to love of theatre and love of performing, and it really does encapsulate how a lot of people feel about the performing industry.
A Chorus Line is on at the National Theatre from the 7th of September. For tickets and for more info, visit theatrical.com.au. Julian, chookers for the season, and thanks so much for the chat.
Thanks so much for having me, Andrew.